To remove the auger motor from the back of the stove, we unplug the wiring harness and then pull the securing pin, and this will release the motor from the auger shaft. To remove the feed system itself, we will remove this screw, and this screw. Once these 3 screws have been removed, the auger assembly should come down out of the stove. Here's your feed assembly removed out of the stove. And this is that pin that we pulled out. And that pin is simply pulls out just like that. And then we can separate the motor from the feed assembly. The feed assembly consists of an auger plate with a brass bushing in the bottom of it. And this piece of weather stripping right here is something that I added to the stove. When the motor is sitting inside the mount, where this metal touches up against the metal of this bracket, sometimes we can get vibrations while it runs. This is a little hack. I put this on there to see if I could dampen the vibrations, and it worked marvelously. So putting a piece of weather stripping on there will keep the auger motor from vibrating throughout the stove when the hopper is somewhat empty. When there's pellets in the hopper, you don't hear it, but when the hopper's empty, where this rests against that metal, it tends to buzz a little bit and it's audible. This is our gasket that seals between the plate and the auger, and this is the auger itself. There is another bushing that is attached up into the top of the feed tube right here, which is somewhat difficult to get out. You gotta get something up in that grabs it and then pull it out in all directions. Usually doesn't need to be replaced. I wanted to show you something cool about this auger motor. So this auger motor is unique. Well, not that unique, because Quadrifire uses this also. But this is actually 2 motors inside of 1 motor casing. One motor spins in the normal direction to drive the auger. And these are your commons that go to the motors that are inside this. And then your orange wire is going to be the primary load, or the primary wire that sends the power to this. It comes in on the 2nd pin, and then because the yellow is a closed circuit, it runs over and through into this capacitor. If you have a lot of dust in the bottom of the hopper and the motor is straining to want to get through it all, your auger motor can jam up. What this system allows to happen is, as you're straining, you're drawing more amps. And when you draw too many amps through this capacitor is going to cut the power like a relay. And your power is no longer going to be coming in on the orange wire. It's going to flip directly over to the yellow wire. And the yellow wire is running to the coil of the secondary motor, which turns the auger in the opposite direction. So under load, this will flip over, the motor will spin the opposite direction and try to free up the jam that's causing the problem. When your capacitor cools, the motor will resume turning in its correct direction, and this system right here will inevitably allow you to get through the problem at the bottom of the hopper, which is usually wet pellets or pellet dust, to the point where you can clear out the jam. There's no indication that the motor is actually doing this, but if you're noticing that you're not getting a very high flame when you think that you should, when you get to the bottom of the hopper, try and clean out all of that dust, and that will prevent this mechanism from, being in use all of the time. Also, when we put this motor back into the stove, we want to make sure that this capacitor is over to the left and away from the combustion motor that resides over here, because if it's looped over around this side, the heat from the combustion motor can actually affect this, and it will cause the motor to run in the opposite direction most of the time when you don't want it to. When you get your new motor and you want to put it back in, to construct the feed system, we simply put our gasket on, put our plate on, line up our motor with the mounting hole like so, and then put our pin through. Just like so. And that's our feed system, ready to go back into the stove.